Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Gain, Grow, Retain. On today's installment, we sit down with Abby Hammer, who is the Chief Customer Officer and Head of Products over at ChurnZero. She's got a really unique perspective, seeing that she oversees the product side of the organization as well as the customer success side of the organization. So we really dove into that dichotomy and how she thinks about linking those two organizations and why they feel it's so important at ChurnZero to have those two departments linked together by a leader like this. So we enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you all get to enjoy it.
Welcome to the Gain, Grow, Retain podcast.
All right, well, welcome everybody. We're joined today from Abby Hammer, who is the Chief Customer Officer and Head of Products at ChurnZero, somebody that we've gotten to know over a little bit here, and in the customer success space, always see Abby around. So Abby, welcome to Gain, Grow, Retain, and thanks for being with us today.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I'm happy to be here.
You know, we were having a pre-conversation a couple of weeks ago just about some of the topics that we talked through today. And, you know, I think one of the interesting dynamics and somewhere that we obviously wanted to start was around your title, just in general, right? You have Chief Customer Officer and you have Head of Products, which we don't often see within a SaaS company. So I think the first question is, you know, how do you look at balancing being a Chief Customer Officer and also looking at the Head of Products? And as you dive into that as well, you know, how did that evolution come for ChurnZero, you know, for that decision to be made?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is definitely an unusual combination, not one that you see come together very often. It happens to be working really well for us right now, given that we are a customer success solution, with really strong goals around being the very best at customer success, not only in the services that we provide, but also in the platform that we give to our customers. It's a nice marriage of those two objectives. My background, actually, when I originally launched my career, I was in customer success. I was not called that yet, but that's where I got my beginnings. And as I developed in customer success, I started to get an interest in product because I was invested in my customers and what they needed to be successful. And a lot of that comes from the product. And so I was at an organization at the time that, I was very fortunate. They were willing to, take a risk on me and let me start into product. And that's how I made the shift. And when we started at ChurnZero, I originally came on as our VP of products, but we needed someone to be taking care of the customers as well, particularly while we were smaller. So I stepped into that because, hey, I've done it before. I love talking to customers, and to be transparent, it wasn't necessarily our plan to have me do both long term, but it's worked out well for us. So we decided, if it's not broke, let's keep it going. I think it works well for us, and I think it could work well in other scenarios as well, because ultimately customer success and product really have the same goals and, and the same challenges. They just present themselves in slightly different ways. But ultimately, both teams are trying to bring value to customers. They're trying to be customer centric. They're trying to keep retention high and keep adoption high and help with fast onboardings and good conversions. Like, everybody's headed towards the same goal. They're just two halves of a team that are getting you there. So I think it is a nice marriage.
So what parts of customer success, what falls under customer success, I guess, is a good question to start with, because in a lot of companies it's all encompassing: onboarding, support, customer success managers, even training, all that kind of stuff. So what does it entail in ChurnZero's world?
Yeah, so we're pretty soup to nuts. So from ink drying on contract through renewal and upsell, that all falls underneath the customer success team. We divide our team into two sub-teams, if you will. We have implementation specialists that are involved particularly heavily at the beginning of a customer's time with us, making sure that their integrations get it set up correctly, that their admins are trained in full, that they really have mastery of the platform so they can continue to use it going forward. But we also introduced a customer success manager off the bat, because that's going to be their long-term advocate. And even once we get a customer live, our customer success managers are responsible for deepening that adoption, building that relationship, delivering value to our customers. They bought us for a reason, and we're always asking ourselves, have we met that goal? When they say, like, was it worth spending money on ChurnZero, we always want the answer to be yes. So having the CSM involved from the beginning is helpful.
How do you arbitrate? I'm really curious about this, because there's often this healthy tension between product org and customer success org. How do you arbitrate between that? Maybe it's easier because you sit in the seat you do, but that's all coming up to you. So how are you able to deal with that on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge, and not to oversimplify the problem, but I think a lot of it comes down to communication and communication styles, and understanding that while we may not talk about things in the exact same way, the goals are the same. So really just making sure that everybody understands why the two teams do the things that they do. And I think it goes both directions. I'll coach my CS team on how they deliver feedback to product. A lot of times in my career, and I've seen it in other teams as well, a customer facing team will deliver feedback to product in such a way that it's just like product doesn't take it seriously. It's so emotional and like, oh my God, everything's on fire, that it just, comes off as hyperbole or, offensive, or like whatever you might take it as a PM, that you sort of miss the important nuggets of what came in that heat. And on the flip side, product has to remember that the best customer success managers feel passionate about helping their customers. So that heat comes from the fact that they really want to help, and that, quite frankly, their livelihood is tied into helping them. A lot of CSMs are, part of how they're paid is based on retention and expansion of customers. I mean, certainly is the case here at ChurnZero. So if product remembers that perspective and why sometimes they might get heat on some of what they get from customers, I think it helps bring the teams closer together. And I think transparency, as a continuation on the communication theme, is really important. When product makes decisions, explain it to customer success. Keep them involved in the scenario. When customer success has feedback for product, try to deliver it in ways with backing data that doesn't make it just seem like an emotional reaction, but rather shows the dollars that are at risk because of the things you're experiencing.
Yep. Yeah. That's great. I've always thought of customer success as really the first line of defense in a way for a product. So I always coach my CSM teams to defend your product management team, because it's hard to understand, but there's a completely different cadence of work there, right? It's not you're not working on a issue response kind of situation. If you're in product, you're really trying to think more strategically, and that it's just apples and oranges, right? It's product people are from Venus, CSMs are from Mars, and the CSM, the urgency comes from being on the front line with the client. But then the product people have to keep it on a long-term strategy of the business and how the product is going to support that.
Absolutely. In general, it is. And in general, a customer success manager not only should defend their product team, but also their product. Like, hopefully you're lucky enough to be working on a product that you believe in. And if you're trying to make a customer successful, you certainly want to be empathetic. People don't like hitting a wall where it's just like, well, you're wrong, it's perfect. Obviously, every product can continue to be improved. But, there is a line that you can cross where if you indulge these things from customers too much, or you don't try to explain why things have been done, which is hopefully information the product has given you, you can build this rapport that's actually based on sort of a disrespect of the product, which doesn't help anyone long term. I just think it doesn't build a good relationship, even though it might initially feel like it's building a good relationship.
Yeah.
How do you think about we're kind of talking about communication, obviously, and you're working with two different teams, and you're trying to kind of facilitate that flow of communication. But is there anything in particular that you found that's worked well in terms of a process or meeting cadence or kind of feedback loop that you're saying, like, man, our product team and our CSMs are so in sync that you don't even have to step in the room, right? Like it's just happening harmoniously. So I'm curious how you think about that.
Yeah, so the initial sort of collection of ideas takes two forms to me. One, I'll start with the product side. In product, we often sometimes, when we do talk to customers, which sometimes we don't do enough, lots of things going on, things happen. But when we talk to customers, often it's sort of geared towards what we want to find out. It's about getting our questions answered as opposed to being in a listen, absorb mode. So I think it's really critical for product to spend a lot of time immersing themselves in in the customers that they support. Go to sales calls, join customer success calls, listen to trainings, get in the support queue, answer some questions. Like, the more deeply you understand what's happening to a customer in a day-to-day, the better you're going to be able to couch all the feedback that comes to you from the customer success team. Now, on the other side for customer success, I think you need to have a formalized way to collect feedback, like you just do. Just even if you have a routine meeting where you meet with people, I think you got to be able to quantify. An hour-long meeting where CSMs, talk about the things that they're hearing. Odds are you're going to hear about the stuff that they most recently dealt with, or their current crisis. It's not necessarily going to be reflective of the larger patterns they're seeing. So I think having an established way to collect that feedback, trying to, yes, give them some space to elaborate on what they think the problem is, but also requiring some structure out of them. What part of the application is this at? How important is this to the customer? What's your sense of priority? Are there dollars at risk on this? Sort of bound in what you want them to tell you about the scenario, so that even if you have meetings to review those, which you should, you can always quantify. Because then if you choose to spend the time on customer items on your roadmap, and I am a strong believer that there should be a good, portion of your roadmap that is clearly reflective of your customers, you want to be able to defend those decisions and the priority of those decisions, and bring it back to the number of times it's been asked for, the dollars that are at risk, the potential expansion that we can't get without this, those sorts of things. So it is really just making sure that product is preset to hear things in the right way, and customer success is set to deliver things in a way that is quantifiable in the end, at least.
Yep. Hey, Abby, I've got this strong feeling that, and I've tried to implement this in multiple companies that I've worked in, but the strong feeling that when you get a piece of product feedback, if you are reporting back to the client on how you're dispositioning that, I have a really strong propensity towards either saying, yes, we're going to do it, and it's going to be in the next release or the next handful of releases, or no, we're not doing it. End of conversation, which is really hard, right? Yeah. Because under that model, the majority of things that you get are going to be no's, because you're only doing so much in the next release. But if you're not doing it in the next couple of releases, I can't guarantee it's going to happen. Right. I'd rather disappoint the client up front and say no, but we're going to capture it for feedback later. If we're doing discovery in that area, we'll call you. Versus letting them down by not being able to deliver on something that I said yes or maybe to. So interested to your perspective on that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. So, here at ChurnZero, when we do product feedback, it gets very, immediately reviewed by product. And there's an initial sort of like either, sorry, it's just not going to happen, so that you can go back and communicate that to the customer, or actually, good news, it's coming very soon, go ahead and commit a rough timeline. Or like you said, okay, I'm not doing this now, but it is, it's related to the themes we're going to do or that we're working on. So I cannot give timelines, but, I'm interested in doing that feedback. And I think, I think this brings up an important point where I think a lot of groups are quite good at collecting that feedback, and they're really poor at using it and feeding it back to their customers, even when they do the things that their customers asked for, which is just like the most missed opportunity ever. Like I did this thing and then I forgot to tell you about it. Now I don't get any credit, or even worse, when you discover it was there, you're annoyed that I didn't tell you. Like, you need to make sure that it's not just about the collection, but it's about an immediate feedback loop with the customer. If you're not going to do it, like you said, call a spade, let the hope go. But if it's something that's there, how do you involve them in that? And I think a lot of times it feels like product takes an idea, disappears, and then they come back weeks, months later, and they're like, okay, here's this thing. And again, I think that's missing a lot of opportunities for CS and support to work together, with CS being, support, product and CS to work together, because CS is the front lines. As you're developing, show a mock to the CS team, ask them what it is, what they think about it, how a customer will react to it. A lot of times CS are also getting customers, they're coming at them and saying, I want X. And so when they communicate with the customer is accepting nothing else but X, the delivery of X. And product isn't necessarily going to do X, because that's not necessarily the best solution or the most inventive solution or all-encompassing solution. So I think also helping customer success, when they deliver that feedback to customers, say, okay, you asked for X and I'm giving you Y, but here's why it actually still accomplishes what you were looking for. So just if you have those constant points of feedback as you're developing features and functionality, CS is going to inherently understand that and feel that and be able to communicate it to customers.
So do you review every piece of feedback that comes in? Does your product team review every piece of feedback and disposition it and feed that back to the CS team?
We do. We'll have to see how that goes as we keep going. And we've already started to prioritize it some. Like we start to, if we're behind in reviewing feedback, maybe we prioritize based on, size of deals or renewals that are coming up soon, strategic accounts. If it comes from, some sort of VIP customer, maybe we take an extra look at that. But as a product team, we try not to show favoritism amongst our customers as well. Like you have to remember there are dollars. Like we're a business at the end of the day, so you can't ignore that part. But some of our best ideas in the product came from smaller customers. They shouldn't be disregarding that. So we do try to go through every single piece of feedback. Again, just so that it's not this open, like, well, I submitted it and maybe it'll come at some point. Who the heck knows? We want to make sure that when a customer says something, they at least feel like they're in a reasonable time, they're going to get something back.
Yep.
I'm curious now how you, talking a little bit, so we've kind of talked through obviously product and customer success, and you've got, some of these processes and feedback loops that you guys are going through. How do you actually align almost like the objectives of the business or the metrics that you're looking at? Like, is it, earlier you talked about, kind of customer success and product are two halves to kind of the problem or the outcome. So I'm curious if you also think about setting goals and expectations and objectives just from a company perspective, almost, within the business, if that's a similar cadence that you look at from that perspective as well.
Yeah. So as a company, as we go into each new year, we try to set themes for ourselves, both as a business, and then variations of that happen for, CS themes, product themes, like what are our strategic goals in the next 3, 6, 12 months? And you want to see lines drawn between all of those, and hopefully some shared KPIs drawn between that. So if you have, just to keep things super general, if you have an objective of, being able to increase upsells by X%, specifically focusing on a couple of modules, then that needs to be reflected in CS, that needs to be reflected in product, like it needs to be carried through the entire organization. I also think it can be interesting when you have those themes and you align everyone around those themes. Something I like to do, again, to keep the teams really close together, is to talk to the CS team and say, all right, let's make you the product managers here a little bit. We have these themes, we have these goals, and you know that. Now, here are all the requests that are somewhat related to those goals. If you got to prioritize, what would you do? What would you put first? Well, what do you think is going to get you the biggest bang for your buck? Almost give them a little taste of sitting in product seat so that they can understand how those themes all come together in a larger capacity.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Do you guys as a organization prescribe to any like OKRs or any particular kind of objective set when you guys look at setting those things, or is it kind of something you guys have come up with your own secret sauce and just use these themes and kind of boil it down from there?
I'd say more around the secret sauce. I mean, we certainly have very clear KPIs that we track as an organization. Our CS team is really focused on revenue retention being the big one that comes out. There are some indications of customer health that we look at as well, and to me, those span both CS and product. They both should be on the line for that. So those would be the numbers that are shared between those teams. But I think thematically, as we decide what we're trying to do as a business, it's all got to come back to that. Like, what was the goal there? And that's a number that's shared by the entire organization. Very rarely are you going to come up with a goal as an organization that one department can do on their own. Like, that's just, not how a business works. We all know. So those themes do sort of are king in the situation because it represents the ultimate number we're trying to move, whatever that number might be.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, we've talked a lot about, you owning product and customer success, but maybe let's talk a little bit about the customers that you guys actually serve at ChurnZero. Mm-hmm. Obviously, customer success product, kind of multiple applications that can be thought of in terms of industries and where this could be applicable. But, where do you guys kind of play most in terms of the software? And then how would you, if you had to describe like your customers in one sentence, like how would you describe them?
That's a good one. Oh, I kind of like that. Hopefully I do a good one here and I can reuse that sentence later. So our goal is to support subscription businesses. Now, a lot of our customer base is SaaS, but is to support subscription businesses and try to help them fight churn, retain existing customers, expand those existing customers, and really optimize the customer experience. I think our sweet spot tends to be small and mid-sized customers. There are solutions out there, whether they're homegrown or purchased, that can be quite enterprise, a very intense to support and maintain. And, to be a little bit Robin Hood about it, we kind of want to make sure that customer success, is available to everybody. It's something that everybody can do and do well. And so I think our background as a leadership team and our background as a product mean that we can particularly serve well small and mid-sized customers. We have plenty of larger customers as well, but we're particularly interested in what we call high velocity teams. So CSMs that are vastly outnumbered by the number of accounts that they have to manage. If I own 20 customers, I better be able to name them and tell you everything about them off the cuff. The tools that I need to support that is very different than if I own 200, 2,000 customers. Just what I need to support myself is very different. For the one sentence, I'd say our customers that come to us are, they are just beginning up the mountain of developing their customer success programs. They're very aspirational, which is always so cool to see and so exciting to experience. And they're often looking to us for help. How do we do this the right way? It puts a very cool challenge on my team that we have to be the absolute best at customer success, because we're being looked at as an example of customer success. But I think our most successful customers are the ones that come into it and say, okay, we've been doing things, but we're here to reimagine what we could be doing and to, really take advantage of this software project, yes, but take advantage of it as an opportunity to reimagine who we are as a team and what we want to accomplish and how we measure that. Wasn't really a sentence, was it, guys? That's okay. We'll give you like 3.5 sentences. Yeah.
That's all right. It was great.
No, I like that. And I think the interesting, one of the points that we wanted to touch on here too, as we started talking is, we continue to find ourselves in the business that we're in, and we get asked the question all the time, what is the breaking point, of when I need a system? When do I need an actual tool to come in? And it's just funny, I think when we walk into a room, it's almost like they're hoping for the silver bullet, and they're like, okay, tell me the ARR I need to have, tell me the amount of customers I need to have that gives you the answer and tells me I need a solution today. And I think obviously it's more nuanced than that, but I'm curious, as ChurnZero goes in and you start to look at some of your customer base, like what is the moment where you're like, hey, you know what? This is the right time that you need to start thinking about a solution.
Yeah, I wish there was a description as well. It'd be really helpful. We could just hand a sheet of paper to prospects and be like, if you meet these things, you're ready for a customer success solution. Because we've had customers that I'll admit when they came to us, I was like, oof, I'm not sure you're ready. And then, they've been rock stars. So it's not a hard and fast rule. I do think you can go a little too early. And I think that's mostly because setting up any customer success platform requires focus, energy, and some elbow grease, quite frankly. No system is going to be perfect magic where you don't have to be putting thought and strategy into it. We describe it like a gym membership. If you have a gym membership but you never go, or you go and you just stand on the treadmill, it's not going to accomplish the same things for you as if you're actually running on the treadmill every single day. So, sometimes when we experience extremely small teams, it's heartbreaking a bit because they're the ones that could benefit from our tools the most, but they're also the ones that struggle the most to actually literally find the hours in the day to implement something. So I think you can go a little too early, but I also think very quickly you can flow into you waited too long. I've seen a lot of teams that waited till they were already at like 15 CSMs, and at that point now we're just trying to control chaos a little bit. And the idea of having the time and the space and the luxury of stepping back and thinking about what you want to accomplish as an organization is a little bit lost. You're just drowning in the day-to-day. So I think it does need to be early on, once you actually understand who your customers are, what makes them successful, how you are participatory in that success. You need to be able to answer those things. And then, as soon as you can answer those things, I think that's the right time to start considering for sure. So it's less about size, I think, and more about where you are at, ideologically.
Yeah. I think it's this interesting. I think what we've also seen is an interesting dynamic where the SaaS leaders, or we'll say, the kind of emerging SaaS companies, are typically led by founders who might be a little bit younger on the spectrum, and they're a little bit more technology driven. And so they are looking for technology solutions rather than looking for human solutions, which I think we've found is an interesting kind of dichotomy. Because to your point, there is a point where you implement the system and then all of a sudden, or you implement the tool, and then all of a sudden it doesn't really work for you because you're not putting the time, effort, focus, and it's just kind of languishing on the side. Mm-hmm. And then there's also on the flip side where you're too human driven, and now you've added, for every 20 accounts, you have a formula where you just add a CSM without really evaluating, can a tool come in and help me during this time period? So I do think there is this nuance where it's kind of figuring out, is this the right moment, and do we have the tech stack and almost the operational leader to actually do this and implement it? I think part of the challenge that we always see is customers buy the tool and they think it's this silver bullet. And then they also forget that there's this operational cadence where, how am I going to get the data in? What's the actual process within the tool itself? How are we thinking about almost like all of the inputs, even outside of data, but segmentation? What's my customer journey? What are all the kind of discovery elements that I need to do in order to prepare myself for the tool?
Absolutely. And our process, we try to be extremely consultative in our process, so we're not asking you to wait till you can answer those questions perfectly. If you can ever answer those questions perfectly, that's amazing. I'd love to talk to you. Like no one ever has those questions answered perfectly. So it's not about being at a place where you're like, we have absolutely everything buttoned up, but you do need to be a place where you've started to ask those questions, so that when we try to consult with you around a strong segmentation strategy, the best areas where we can employ automation for the biggest bang for our buck, that you have thoughts there, that you have plans there, even if they're not fully fleshed out, but it's not the first time you've thought about it. The first time you thought about it shouldn't be when you're trying to do it. You've hopefully done a little bit of pre-planning on that.
I think you got to treat it like part of the product as well. And you get that good baseline of operational data and some of the things that are in place. The other problem with always adding humans is that you inevitably start to miss opportunities where you could be automating because you're just plugging the gaps with humans. So we've seen a couple of instances here recently where folks are starting to put the system in first. It's hard because it's an end user system, right? And you don't want to get too far ahead of your end users that you will have eventually, but in some cases they're putting it in before they even hire the first one, at least the data and analytics and whatnot. So
yeah, I mean, we have had customers do that and be successful. So, we'll certainly say it is possible. I just think if you are that and you were looking to do that first, you need to be prepared to do even a little bit more work than anybody else. Just because you are, pre-leading things so much, you can certainly be successful. You're just going to have some additional things to work through.
Yep. All right, cool. Well, Abby, you've been very gracious with your time. We've enjoyed the conversation. We got one final question for you. We didn't prep you for this, so we're putting you on the spot here. But what's the big thing that you need to accomplish this week for ChurnZero? What's on your list?
Yeah, the big thing we're working on right now is we're taking a look at our onboarding process. We've had the same process since we started. Well, we have been iterating on the same process, I should say, since we started. And it produces really good results, but we're actually trying to self-reflective and say, where are opportunities where we can make some of this less, one-to-one communications. Again, it's coming back to nothing happens automatically. Even ChurnZero, we use ChurnZero at ChurnZero. We drink our own champagne. But we have to be purposeful about coming back and saying, okay, we have this great process, but is it really as streamlined as it could be? Have we automated in the best spots? So that's actually, we've just kicked off a project to really start to look at onboarding and what we can do there, for our own benefit and our own scaling, but also for the benefit of our customers. So we're starting to do some planning there, and hopefully we'll have a lot of new cool stuff in 2020 as a result.
Awesome. And that's full circle back to why it's so good to own both product and CS. That's
Exactly.
Hey guys, thanks so much for taking the time to listen to the Gain, Grow, Retain podcast. If you liked what you heard, please take a moment and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues and subscribe. We really appreciate it. Talk to you soon.